The challenges I faced with my stepson, Scott, were deeply complex, leaving me grappling with emotions I could scarcely articulate. Scott, my husband Jonathan's son from his previous marriage, had become a significant point of tension in our lives. For years, I had chosen silence over confrontation, not wanting to burden Jonathan with my struggles. One pivotal day highlighted the depth of Scott's disdain for me. Jonathan, tied up with work, couldn't pick me up from the airport when I returned from my hometown, so Scott came instead. My gratitude was met with an icy response. He made no effort to hide his contempt, mocking me with a sneer as he suggested that the only way he'd allow me to ride in his car was if I bought him a new one. His words stung. I was nothing but a parasite, living off his father. To drive his point home, he left me stranded, telling me to walk home if I wanted to get there. As I trudged along the roadside, a mixture of anger, hurt, and determination swirled within me. My journey with Jonathan had begun 12 years earlier when we worked together in the same company. What began as a professional connection blossomed into love, and Jonathan's proposal was nothing short of magical. Yet, I hesitated. He was a widower and a single father, raising Scott with the help of his parents. Marrying him meant stepping into the daunting role of a mother figure to Scott, who was only a child then. In those early days, I tried everything to forge a bond with Scott. We spent hours on shared activities, and his initial hesitance eventually softened. When he accepted me as a new parental figure in his life, I thought we had turned a corner. Jonathan and I married with the hope of building a harmonious family, but that dream began to crack under the weight of growing tensions. Jonathan noticed Scott's struggles, especially his withdrawal from school and increasing isolation. Concerned, he asked if I could switch to part-time work to spend more time at home, hoping it might help Scott feel less lonely. I agreed, reworking my schedule to prioritize his needs, but instead of fostering connection, Scott's behavior toward me worsened. He began nitpicking everything I did. The meals I cooked were never good enough, too bland, too dry, too unlike what a professional chef might prepare. If dinner wasn't freshly made when he walked in, he'd demand I make it again. He dismissed my efforts, often reminding me I was only able to live comfortably because of his father's income. My work hours and long commute seemed invisible to him. His demands overshadowed my sacrifices. Scott's criticisms extended beyond the kitchen. He scrutinized my cleaning, pointing out specks of dust I missed or tiny wrinkles in the laundry. Despite never lifting a finger himself, he trailed behind me with an air of superiority, ridiculing my every move. If I stayed silent, he'd taunt me, daring me to tell Jonathan. He knew how to mask his cruelty. In front of Jonathan, he transformed into a polite and caring son, leaving me alone with the weight of his hostility. It became increasingly clear that Scott's disdain wasn't born in isolation. My in-laws, who had never warmed to me, mirrored his sentiments. Their disapproval of our marriage fueled Scott's attitude, and a particularly revealing incident during a family dinner cemented this realization. Scott had inherited their contempt, wielding it as a weapon against me. The final blow came unexpectedly. One afternoon, I came home early due to illness and overheard Scott talking to a friend. Their conversation laid bare a truth I had long suspected but avoided confronting. Scott's refusal to attend school wasn't due to struggles or emotional distress. It was a deliberate choice to devote himself to video games. Our home, and my presence in it, were mere conveniences that enabled his indulgences. Fueled by frustration and a newfound clarity, I decided it was time to confront him. Bursting into his room, I interrupted his gaming session, catching him off guard. With a calm yet firm voice, I challenged him to be honest with his father about his actions. The moment was charged with the weight of years of unresolved conflict, but it was also a turning point. I hoped that by bringing the truth to light, we could begin to address the deeply rooted issues in our fractured family. I should have simply walked home. It would have been easier than enduring the spectacle that unfolded before me. But Jonathan's response to the situation was unlike anything I could have expected. He wasn't swayed by the attempts to deflect responsibility or the venomous accusations hurled in my direction. Instead, he remained calm and collected, revealing a photo on his phone that would change everything. This moment marked a dramatic turning point in our family dynamic, one that had been building for years but was now finally coming to light. The photo hinted at a much deeper issue that had been simmering beneath the surface, and Jonathan's composed demeanor suggested that he was ready to confront the truth head-on. It became clear that he had long been aware of the toxic manipulation and disrespect coming from both Scott and my in-laws. They had underestimated his resolve, And now it was time to face the music. The tension in the room reached its peak as Jonathan swiped through his phone and revealed a series of damning text messages between Scott and my in-laws. The shock that spread across their faces was palpable. No one had expected Jonathan to be so well informed, least of all Scott, who had desperately hoped to find support in his grandparents. But they turned their backs on him in that moment, no longer willing to shield him from the consequences of his actions. What Jonathan had uncovered was a covert arrangement between Scott and his grandparents that had been ongoing for some time. Scott had convinced them to fund his gaming obsession, all under the guise of needing financial support. Through a series of carefully worded messages, Scott had requested, and received, a substantial amount of money without Jonathan's knowledge. I felt a sense of grim validation as I recounted how I had stumbled upon these messages years ago. It had been purely by chance. Scott had carelessly left his phone in the living room, and I had noticed the conversation when I went to pick it up. At first, I hesitated, unsure whether to share my discovery with Jonathan, unsure of how to bring up something so uncomfortable. When I did finally show him, the blame from my in-laws was swift and harsh. They accused me of snooping and labeled me an outsider in their family, quick to deflect responsibility and avoid addressing the truth. But I wasn't done. I had more evidence that would strip away their defenses. I presented a credit card statement that revealed something none of them could deny: $121,000 in charges for gaming-related purchases, all made without my consent. The room fell into stunned silence as Jonathan clarified that we often used my credit card for household expenses, which explained how Scott had been able to access it. At first, my in-laws were defensive, but as the weight of the situation began to sink in, their attitudes slowly shifted. The realization hit them like a freight train. Scott's behavior wasn't just a minor issue, it was a serious problem that had escalated over time. Jonathan was frustrated and livid as he confronted both his parents and Scott about the misuse of money. He emphasized the responsibility that came with being part of a family, stressing how their indulgence had been harmful to Scott's growth and behavior. Despite the growing evidence, my in-laws attempted to shift the blame onto me, accusing me of poor parenting and suggesting that my influence had somehow led to Scott's behavior. Their accusations were baseless, yet their determination to scapegoat me seemed relentless. This only added to the absurdity of the situation, but Jonathan's unwavering defense of me was a turning point. He spoke up, reminding his parents of the sacrifices I had made to be a part of this family. He acknowledged the many adjustments I had made, switching to part-time work, being more present at home for Scott, and the countless other efforts I had put forth to make things work. His words were a strong signal of his support for me, marking a pivotal moment in the conversation. The confrontation didn't stop there. Scott, sensing an opportunity to further manipulate the situation, tried to discredit me by accusing me of infidelity. His tone was full of triumph as he presented what he claimed was evidence. My in-laws, eager to support Scott in any way they could, jumped on the bandwagon, urging Jonathan to find a more suitable wife. They accused me of being ungrateful for the life I had been given, suggesting that I had somehow acted dishonestly while living off their son. Scott, feeding off their encouragement, even questioned Jonathan's judgment, suggesting that he find someone younger and more compliant. But the mood in the room shifted dramatically when Jonathan, with a cool and calculated calmness, revealed the truth behind Scott's so-called evidence. The photograph Scott had presented as proof of my infidelity was actually from an annual dinner I had attended with Jonathan's longtime friend, a tradition that predated any of the accusations Scott was now making. Jonathan clarified the situation, revealing that the dinner reservation had been for 4 people, and showed evidence of the plans that had been made well in advance. The revelation completely debunked Scott's claims, and for the first time, my in-laws were forced to confront the baselessness of their accusations. Despite the revelation, Scott didn't back down. He continued to insist that I was financially dependent on Jonathan and therefore had no right to any semblance of autonomy or respect within the household. This only fueled more derogatory comments from my in-laws, who continued to downplay my contributions to the family. But Jonathan wasn't backing down. He stood up for me, reminding them of all the sacrifices I had made. He pointed out that, at Scott's request, I had adjusted my work schedule to be there for him, even when it meant sacrificing my own career aspirations. He made it clear that I had always prioritized the well-being of the family, and that my financial contributions, though often kept quiet to avoid upsetting Scott, had always been significant. Jonathan further revealed a crucial piece of information that stunned everyone. It was I who had suggested and facilitated the move to a suburban home to provide Scott with a better environment. I had been the one who pushed for the move, who made it happen, and I had also been contributing to the household expenses all along. The realization hit hard, especially when Jonathan pointed out that Scott had never contributed anything significant to the household since he began working. Faced with these truths, my in-laws and Scott quickly backpedaled. The cheating accusations were dismissed as a misunderstanding, and they suddenly expressed a newfound understanding of my role in purchasing the house and contributing to the family's financial stability. It was an abrupt shift, one that exposed the superficiality of their previous attacks and revealed just how little they truly understood about my sacrifices and commitment to the family. The moment felt like a bittersweet victory, while the truth had finally been laid bare. It also underscored how much we had all endured to reach this point. The confrontation, while necessary, had revealed just how deeply the toxic dynamics had taken root, and how much work lay ahead to heal the wounds that had been caused.